Hello, and welcome to the Quiet Part podcast, hosted by Mark Hansen, where he explores the unspoken stories hidden in the quiet hours we spend at home. I'm Wendy McConnell. Well, hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really good. I've just been enjoying this cooler weather,
Uh,
and I said that, Kristen. You just told me not to talk about the weather, and so I just had to. I just had to bring up the weather one more time. Okay, this is live feedback, husband to wife, right here in the podcast. I love you.
Stop talking about it so you just go ahead and just go ram right into it.
Double down. Why not?
Okay.
Well, I mean, when that first breeze comes through, that's like 65. You have to enjoy that. I want that on the podcast. That first breeze is always so nice.
Okay. Yeah, the first one, but then they get colder and colder and
Oh,
colder.
yeah, yes. That's oh, that's not good. That's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we going to be doing today?
Today we're going to be talking about how do we go from chaos to calm, or what feels like chaos. Sometimes I sit down with a prospect or even a new client, and we start trying to work through my system, my processes, the things that I want to take people through, and they have this sincere concern that their situation is actually so chaotic that it can't be fixed, that they're so far beyond repair that we can't do anything. And I always find that interesting because uh, I think there's a way to take anything and turn it from chaos to calm, right? Because really, you just have the same issues. They just might be different scales. If you make more money, you can get yourself into more trouble, but it's just a greater scale of trouble. You typically aren't finding different actual financial troubles. You've got, maybe some runaway debt, and that's going to have categories inside of it. Or we're going out to eat too much. It's like, well, yeah, those are variable expenses. Like these are things that fit into these categories. But what I find is that sometimes if people don't know the categories, again, the way that I talk about it, we've got saving, investing, fixed expenses, and variable expenses. Pretty much everything falls into one of those buckets. And so it doesn't matter what Wendy comes to the table with, I'm able to fit it into one of those four categories. And because we put it in one of those four categories, it becomes very, very simplistic to move from what feels like chaos to calm. And people really enjoy going from chaos to calm. But the first step, what do you think the first step is, Wendy, to move from chaos to calm?
Well, what do you consider chaos? I really is my big question. What does chaos look like in this situation?
Yeah. So, not skirting the question, but the answer is not quite Mark thinks this is chaos. It's much more like, if I was talking to Wendy, what does Wendy think is chaos? What is a mental load that Wendy has to bear because of her financial situation? And that typically comes in two flavors, but it looks totally different all the time. The two flavors are unknown cash flow and unpredictable cash flow, right? So I've got people who earn enough money that the bank accounts don't go to zero, but they have no idea where their money goes, nor do they know if they're on the path to retirement, right? That, I would say, feels like chaos. I've got other clients who are heavily commissioned based. And so their income is going to scale up and down with the seasons. Maybe 60% of their money comes in one quarter of the year. That right there can feel like chaos if we're not prepared for the rest of the year. So those are the two main flavors, but how it presents looking at one family versus the other, it's going to look a little different. Is that helpful? Is that a good way to phrase that?
It is helpful. See, yeah, chaos just what brought to my mind was I don't know where my money's coming from to pay all of these bills.
Yeah. Okay. So that's like the chaos is in front of me, and I want to douse it. I want to get rid of the chaos. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just, find some more money somewhere, pay off all these bills and not have to worry about it. But yeah, I mean, we always have to bring more money in because the bills come every month.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the fixed expenses. Those are the things that keep on coming, but we still want to keep paying for them. I like this roof over my head. I like the lights
Yes,
to turn on when I flip the switch. Those kinds of things.
exactly.
Um, both of these things can feel like pain. They're not painful specifically, but they feel like pain, and that's because they can be so difficult. Unpredicted, unknown cash flow and unpredictable cash flow can be so difficult to keep inside your brain. Right? They don't match up with how we try to go about our lives. They feel painful sometimes, and that's sometimes what brings people to my desk. That's how we even get into our first meeting, is because the pain became unbearable. And so again, that's how sometimes people are sitting down saying, I don't think there's a solution, right? Because they're assuming if there was a solution, then they could have come up with it on their own.
Right.
But what's they live in the chaos, and they don't call it chaos, but they're living in the chaos. They lose track. Where's the shoreline? They lose all of their bearings, and so by the time they sit down, they've forgotten what maps are. They've forgotten what compasses are. They don't know how to read the stars. But to sit down and just to start to categorize things, what we're trying to do is recognize the chaos, admit that there's chaos, and it stops being called chaos when it goes to known information. That's when it starts to feel calm. Not because it's predictable, not because everything's gone away, not because you're so much in control of your personal finances, but when you at least know, the surprises feel less surprising. Is it? You know?
Yes. So is it almost like, going from paycheck to paycheck to having a little bit of a rainy day fund, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the progression that I've seen, right? Paycheck to paycheck, there's one step before that. One time the step before that is credit card to credit card, right?
Oh.
So it's maybe even $100,000 is coming in. What's interesting is I have not discovered. So I'll put an asterisk on this statement. I have not discovered a specific level of income that makes you not care that your household cash flow feels like chaos. This affects people that make $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, $1 million a year. If these things exist, it feels like chaos. But I think the lowest end of the spectrum, as in where we've got the most chaos, would be credit card to credit card, as in money's coming in and we're spending more than that. And we're spending more than that. We know that we are because the credit card balance is growing month over month or quarter over quarter. Sometimes I sit down with someone and I'm like, hey, Peyton, how's household cash flow? How do you feel like it's going? Oh, it's going good. Yeah, we're in pretty good control. It's like, well, you've got $25,000 of credit card debt. That makes me think it's not in control. That
Right.
makes me think this is not good. And that is interesting because some people don't see it that way because we swipe the piece of plastic and we put it in a different file cabinet and we just slam that thing shut and then we lock it inside the vault and we never talk about it. And it's, oh, no, this is very, this is very important that we talk about. That's a
Right.
really big sign that we're not doing a great job with our household cash flow. Um, and it affects people differently also. My stay-at-home spouses might feel more of the overwhelm because they're handling paying the bills. Sometimes people split their money handling up like that. So maybe the stay-at-home spouse, they're in charge of the bills, and so they see more transactions. So they get confronted with the chaos more frequently. My working spouse, maybe they feel, hey, there is chaos. I got to go back to the well. I got to go get more water because I need to pour more water on top of this situation. And they feel locked into work, right? So the way that it shows up in my couples can be very different. It can affect people both individually and together as a couple. And I think that's super interesting and is maybe a dynamic that isn't talked about enough. Like the same problem can actually, between two people, have three different manifestations: how person one interprets it, how person two interprets it, and then how they interpret it together. I don't feel like I hear enough people talking about that. And that's why some of these problems feel so complex and so hard to solve.
Okay. So how do would we start just then from going from credit card to credit card to paycheck to paycheck to getting a little bit better than that?
Yeah, yeah. So credit card to credit card, and then eventually maybe we're just paycheck to paycheck. Like for some people, that's a literal upgrade. That is an upgrade to their current scenario. And then maybe there's some Dave Ramsey baby steps. You get $1,000 in your emergency fund, and okay, that's more than zero, right? And that $1,000 as a backup feels so different than, well, we're out of money, swipe the credit card. We're out of money, swipe the credit card. I do want to give credit again to Dave Ramsey for the stuff that he says really can help your finances, especially on that lower end of the spectrum of how we're getting through our finances. As we climb up, maybe the emergency fund gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But how do we do that? How do you actually move from one position on the scale to the other? And that's what I call building the banks, right? So we got the raging river comes crashing in. We build up the banks. The banks actually start to turn the river, slow it down, give it direction, point it where you want it to go. The money that's coming in is a raging river if we don't give it structure. If we kind of play this out, what people really enjoy, Wendy, when we get further into my process, when we get towards kind of the maintenance mode is when we've taken the banks and we've curved them around, and eventually they kind of loop back on to where it starts. And what people feel like they're sitting in at that point is much more a lazy river than a raging river. And
Okay.
that's like, hey, get a mojito, get the tube. As long as you're wearing sunscreen, just keep on floating around.
Load on.
Just float on.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and people really enjoy that because I don't know. What do you prefer, Wendy? Raging river or lazy river?
Well, I do like to float.
Okay, so you like a little bit of rapids in there.
I like a little bit of a wake once in a while to give me some bounce. But yeah, I pretty much like just lounging around with the drink in my hand for sure.
Yeah. Oh man. So if you ever now, okay, I did this when I don't remember how old. I was probably 10. So that puts this 25-ish years ago. Somewhere between 20 and 25 years ago. There's this place in Texas in South Padre, and it's Schlitterbahn South Padre. And the entire water park is a lazy river, the entire thing. It's like you get in at the wave pool and you go off to the right hand side, and they use like water jets to raise you up higher. And then you go down the rapids, and then it's a lazy river all the way back down, and you come back to the left side of the wave pool, and then you just float back across, and the jets take you to the top. And again, the entire thing, if you want to get a drink, you just float off to the side and you're floating in the drink line. If you want to go on a ride, you just float off, and you never get out of your tube. You can be in your tube for 18 hours. I mean, it is amazing.
Wow. Sounds amazing.
I don't know what's happened to that park in the last 15 years, so don't take your family there, but it was super cool when I went. I'll have to look into it and I'll report back to the people.
Okay.
Yeah. Building the banks is really just structure, right? It's fancy words for saying, let's put some structure and some intention to our finances. And that structure and that intention will look totally different for each family. And that depends on what are we trying to account for? Are we trying to account for car payments or not? Home payments or not? Is the home payment changing, right? What do we need to take into consideration? And I can hear you already, voice of public opinion. I hear you. That's too much homework. I don't like this. I don't want to track it. I don't want to do all these things. Sorry, you came to the homework podcast. That's how we get up and down this scale is but you don't have to go crazy with it, right? This can be as simple as what I suggest to some people: go to the dollar store and get a journal and get a pen and just write down the money that you spend. Where is it going? And then, and this could be, I say date night. Some people are like, oh, great, my date night, looking at my cash flow. Yeah, like, dude, fine. Drink a glass of wine, whatever you need to do, make it a date night. You set a timer for 15 minutes and just run through the spending. Hey, we like this, we don't like this. We like this, we don't like this. When the timer goes off, if you're not done, to put it away. Put it away. But just set 15 minutes. Just a little bit of education is going to go a long way in this process. It's how we try to go from chaos to calm. Because what can't happen is client shows up, client presents to me all of their chaos, right? And then I just, oh, click, boom, bang. Here's your lazy river. We have to actually build it together. But maybe the secret, the piece that I hope people discover while we're working together, the secret is that most of the work has to be done by the client because they're the ones that have to change their mentality. I already know. I'm trying to teach them. That's like the teacher in the class isn't doing the homework. And that's why she doesn't know there's a typo on question 13, but it's because she's not looking at the homework. But you have to, as the client, as the person who's trying to move up the scale, you have to be the one that puts in the work. I can describe the work. I can help you get through the work. I can remind you that this is super important and that you really want to pay attention to this and that you've told me you're tired of living in the chaos. But if the person, the client, the potential client, if that person, whoever you are, doesn't put in the work, we can pretty much expect that nothing's going to change.
So what does the work look like? What do we have to do? What do we have to do? Like, for example, like I had a conversation with my husband. We were on our way to breakfast on a Sunday morning and we were talking about potentially getting a new car. Neither one of us have a car payment right now. It's very nice. But, you know, sometimes you need, to upgrade and all of that. So we were talking about it and he said, I don't really need a new car because, I kind of like going out to breakfast on a Sunday morning. So it's kind of like well, we get a new car, but then we probably won't ever go out to breakfast. Is that the kind of work, like the choices that we're supposed to be thinking about?
Absolutely. That's a great way to, I mean, I definitely applaud that kind of thought process because that's exactly what we're talking about. Sometimes we forget as humans, like, if I go spend money on breakfast, can I take those same dollars and send it in for my car payment? If I do the car payment, can I spend those same dollars in retirement? If I put the money into retirement, can I go to Disney World? Can I go to Chick-fil-A? Again, this Chick-fil-A podcast had to talk about Chick-fil-A one more time. This it's a we can only spend the money in one place. And so if that's the framework, I think that's maybe the first lens that all of this should be viewed through. I only get to spend this money one time. So what do I want to spend it on? Okay, well, would I rather have breakfast or lights that work? I'll take lights that work.
Right.
Okay, would I rather have breakfast or a roof over my head? A roof over my head. Okay, would I rather have a car payment or breakfast? Like, well, now we're in variable expense territory. This is where it is up to you. It is up to the person who has the money. It was your life that you took, your time, and you traded it for dollars. These are your dollars. If you want breakfast, go to breakfast. If you want car payments, you can get a car payment. Let's just make sure it fits into the budget. As in, just because you swing through McDonald's 3 times a month and spend $15 on breakfast doesn't mean we can go get a Cadillac Escalade with $800 car payment. It's not the same thing. Okay, we have to we have to look at things in direct ratios to each other. That's very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So that's what we're thinking about when we're talking about, what we need to do the work. So, what else?
Well, I think another piece is for my families that have been very successful, my families that have more income coming in. What's a little bit, it's not a trick, but it's another misconception. More income probably means you need more structure, not less. And you need more structure, not the same. Because somebody who's got a level of income that allows them to come in, income that's coming in, they've got enough money to have a modest home, save for a modest retirement, drive modest cars. Well, that's slightly different than somebody who's got enough money coming in that they've got a significant sized home. They're saving for a significant retirement. They've also got a vacation home. And because of their cash flow, because it allows them to have this as an option, they would like to lease their cars and they plan on leasing cars for the rest of their life, right? Vastly different income levels, potentially, vastly different desired ways of spending that money. To spend that level of money, you actually need more structure, not less. Which kind of goes back to that point that I made on the first one, recognizing the chaos. There's not a level of income that I know of that makes it to where you don't have to do this exercise. But if you don't do this exercise, you can just be squandering that much more.
Right.
And that's the risk is, you spend your whole life getting these jobs and these promotions and you go to work to support your family and you're so excited to do these things and you're doing them for good reasons and then the money comes in, the success follows, you're climbing the corporate ladder. You were, senior whatever, now you're the senior director and then you're the vice president and then you're regional vice president. But if we climb that ladder without the structure, I've seen that go very poorly for some people. You mismanage $10, somebody might forgive you, right? Thinking of spouses and whatnot. Spouses might get over mismanagement of $10. You mismanage $100,000, people might start to get upset. It just the same the weight, I guess the weight of wielding that much money can start to cause issues that didn't exist when we were wielding a smaller amount of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, this can look a little different for people. My stay-at-home spouse might feel like, well, budgeting is restrictive, right? I've got a lot of families that are really into their health, right? So it's some combination of like they homeschool or they're doing private education and they eat really healthy food because they've maybe done some research and we don't want to put certain things in our bodies. We do want to put other things that we've deemed good into our bodies. And budgeting, they hear the word budget and it's like, you don't get to do any of that stuff. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm not saying is budgeting or spending analysis or any of those other words, all those other synonyms that really mean the same thing. What I'm not saying is here comes Mark to take some kind of like preformed thing and stamp it on top of your family and your private education and your not gluten free, your organic food is now squeezed out the side as excess. It's cut off from the waffle that I just squeezed into the little waffle iron thing.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if that's important to you, let's account for it. But if we get through this exercise and we've accounted for the home that you want that allows you to continue doing the homeschool, and we've accounted for the um, homeschooling and the expenses that go with that, because that's what you want to do as a stay at home spouse. If we account for that, and the income that's coming in doesn't leave us enough money for the car payment, then we have to act accordingly. That's what I am saying, is that based on what's coming in and the things that you tell me are non negotiable, this is what we want our life to be like. I will help you figure out how that all fits together, but it might not leave very much to dribble over into those variable expenses. We might not have Netflix. We might not go out to breakfast. We might not get the new car with the new car payment. But what we did do, what we tried to do, the goal was we actually accomplished sequentially from your most important things down to your least important things. And so what you're not able to accomplish potentially based on the income would only be the things that matter the least to you. And as your desires shift, right? Kids grow up, they become independent, private school education is no longer needed. Well, now we're freeing up the budget. If we free up the budget, maybe that allows some of those variable expenses to increase. Now we can get Netflix. Now we can go to brunch. Now we could get the car payment. We could buy the more expensive car and we can finance it because we've got more space in the budget that's left over. But again, we only know it if we build the banks, if we do the exercise. We only know what can fit in there if we actually put in the work. And I think a lot of people forget that part.
Okay.
My working spouse can feel like sometimes people latch onto this too much because it's financial control. And it's like, sometimes people think, I would say rather inappropriately. I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody specific, but like just because you earn the money doesn't mean you get to control the money. That's not how it works in a marriage situation. And so when somebody's thinking, well, I earn that money, and so then I want perfect say over where the money goes, I do call people to the carpet pretty easily. It's like, that's hang on. We need to make sure both parties are represented here, because one person's budget can't be a married person's budget. It doesn't work like that. And sometimes I see it in like a domineering fashion, and sometimes I see it in what would it be called when like the other spouse just is like, oh, I don't care, think of whatever. What's that word? What would that be called?
Carefree, careless?
Maybe a carefree, or just like, oh, like whatever they decide, I'll be fine with it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you feel like that, right? It's like, oh, I don't like when I go to a coffee shop, I don't like to read the menu. I'll just tell the barista, hey, you pick whatever you want, and I pretend like I don't care. But if they serve me up some drink that's like half sugar, half syrup, and just like a little spritz of coffee on top, I remember very quickly what I actually like is black coffee. And I forgot that your favorite thing might not be black coffee. What I really meant was pick any black coffee and give me your favorite.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And kind of transitioning to the last piece here, if we get all of that set up, if we get the structure, we go through, we do the exercise, you take your date nights, you devote 15 minutes to reading through the journal, and we like this, we don't like this, we like this, we don't like this. If you forget to protect this whole system, then you're just one potential situation away from it all crumbling back into chaos. And Wendy, how do we protect our financial situation? How do we do it?
I don't know. You have to tell me. I have failed. I've failed you, Mark.
We do it with the emergency fund. We have that emotional, or not emotional, that financial backstop. We've got money in reserve. We've got money ready to go, ready to deploy if we run out of incoming money for some reason, one reason or another.
I should have known
The
that, Mark. I should have
it's
known.
okay.
I'm
You may
sorry.
ask you again, Wendy. How do we protect the financial situation? How do we do it, Wendy?
I think it's the emergency fund.
Great job, Wendy. You've been paying attention. I love it.
Woo!
I'm so glad you pay attention to these podcasts. Emergency funds sometimes sound really boring to people, and you're like, why would I want an emergency fund? And it's like, because that's what protects all this hard work that you're putting in. That's how we preserve it and get it ready to continue existing. The emergency fund is what allows you to have the ups and downs, the ins and outs, the pieces in life that we're not in control of. The emergency fund is what allows you to continue moving forward if there's just a little blip on the radar. There's an entire discussion. I think we talked last episode about how important the emergency fund is. We talked in episode 4 about cash flow. We talked in episode 6 about financial priorities. All of these things link together. If you are showing up here in this episode for the first time, this is not a single isolated conversation. What I couldn't do was record a 23-hour podcast. Nobody would listen to it. So I'm breaking it up into little chunks, but you need to take these conversations as a whole because that's what they really are. They're extensions of each other. Episode 10 is after 9 because it's a sequential conversation. This is episode 11. It's an extension of episode 6. Episode 6 was an extension of episode 4. They all link together, and I'm trying to create more of a web versus a strand when it comes to how do we think about our financial situation.
Yeah, you can't start with Harry Potter book number 5. You have to start with 1.
Talk about chaos. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a series.
Oh, I was thinking so Harry Potter was like the first series of books that I really, really read through. I remember the third book came out, and that's when it really hit my radar. So I went 1, 2, and I went through it in the correct way. But I cannot remember what I pictured in my mind previous to the movies coming out. Like the movies coming out really stripped away my imagination for that. And I thought about that so much because that was the first book series that I really read. And I remember I mispronounced Hermione in my mind.
Right.
I thought it was like Hermione or so. I was like, what a weird name. Why would you name your child that? Hermione sounds a lot prettier than Hermione. But the movies were good in that sense. It's like, oh, that's how you say that name, you know? And up until the first movie, I had no idea how to actually pronounce that name.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, some things are good and some things, like you said, maybe not as you imagined they would have been. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so people are on a journey. They're learning about their finances. We're trying to go from chaos to calm. How do we continue this journey? Again, go back. You can listen to some other episodes. I've given you some suggestions. If you want some non-financial episodes, those are mixed in there too. Episode 3, we talk about parental guilt. This little thing that a lot of people feel. It's like, how do we handle this thing? How do we like finances while raising a family? That's yeah. Sometimes that comes out as parental guilt, and we talked about that episode 3. If you want to learn some more, go to the website, second-comma.com. You can learn about who I am, what I do, who I do it for, how I do it. We can get in touch with each other there. If you want to know more about this topic, go a little more in depth. I wrote an ebook. It's called What the Heck Are You Thinking? It's all about, like I said in this episode, there is not a shortcut. It's not earning more money. It's not doing something specific that I'm just secretly not telling you. I don't think there's a shortcut to go from chaos to calm. So I wrote an ebook to talk about how there is no shortcut, and that those things are called hacks. So it's what the heck are you thinking? But read through there. It follows Peyton and Jordan, fictional couple who are trying to do what you do. They're trying to navigate through these financial situations, and it is a book written to highlight the things that they think about correctly and the things they think about incorrectly. And I wrote it so that families could educate themselves about their financial situation. If you want comments or questions, you want to send those in to me. Those have been super helpful. Shoot me an email using the email address in the notes. Other than that, I think, Wendy, next time we're going to be talking about emotional baggage. We're going to switch a little bit out of finance topics. I think people are ready for something a little different. We're going to talk about the baggage, our carry-ons, what we bring into these financial conversations. I'm looking forward to that.
all right, me too. Well, thanks so much, Mark. We appreciate it. And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time.